The jungle pulsed with life. Shafts of amber sunlight pierced the canopy above, spotlighting coils of mist that curled around broad leaves and twisted vines. Birds called in short, melodic bursts from unseen perches. And somewhere deep within the shadows, a low growl trembled through the air like a distant drumbeat. Everything here breathed in rhythm, raw, ancient, unbroken. She stood at the edge of a shallow creek, barefoot, silent. Her presence seemed to ripple through the clearing, not as an intruder but as something elemental. The woman's gaze was steady, her lips set in a neutral line, though her skin bore no markings and her clothing was plain, just a loose green shirt and weathered canvas pants. She seemed carved from the forest itself. Her hair, curled and sun-touched, moved slightly in the breeze, but her body remained perfectly still. Around her, 5 tigers lingered in the undergrowth, their eyes glowing with a strange calm. Not one of them looked at her with suspicion. They circled her as if she were one of their own. No one knew her name. The nearby tribes called her the Quiet Flame. The few who had encountered her spoke of it in hushed voices, of a woman who walked barefoot among predators, who had once stood between a charging rhino and a terrified child and made the beast stop. She was a story, a warning, a marvel. Some said she wasn't real. Others claimed she was the jungle's avatar, born when man went too far. 3 miles east, something else stirred. They came with gear strapped to their backs, satellite beacons blinking, boots crunching damp soil and rotting foliage. 6 of them, dressed in reinforced combat fatigues and armed with enough firepower to take down a small fortress. At the front of the group, Commander Thorn swatted a hanging vine aside and surveyed the path ahead. His jaw was square, his brow perpetually furrowed. He didn't believe in myths. Behind him trudged Dr. Lena Harrow, a field biologist with doctorate in predator behavior and a thick accent that betrayed her European upbringing. Her eyes were sharp, always scanning, cataloging, measuring. Unlike Thorn, she didn't dismiss the stories. She didn't believe them, either. Not yet, but she came to observe, not conquer. "This place is different," Lena murmured, pausing beside a cluster of orchid-like plants that seemed to pulse in the light. "The ecosystem is reactive." "Spare me the poetry," Thorn said. "We're not here to sightsee." Their objective was unclear to most of the group. Officially, it was a reconnaissance mission. Gather samples, scout terrain, evaluate potential for an outpost. Unofficially, Thorn had other orders. Find a woman, assess the threat, eliminate if necessary. The corporate minds funding this expedition didn't like unknown variables in biodiverse hot zones they planned to harvest. By noon, the jungle heat was thick enough to drink. They crossed 3 shallow streams, lost a drone to a flock of aggressive birds, and stepped over fresh tiger tracks, wide as a man's face. "She's nearby," Lena whispered. Thorn grunted. "Or the cats are. Either way, we keep moving." They did, until the forest opened into a basin ringed with giant kapok trees. The ground dipped into a natural amphitheater, and in its center stood the woman. She was standing alone, surrounded by tigers. No one spoke. Even Thorn froze, hand tightening on his rifle, but not raising it. The tigers weren't growling. They weren't pacing. They simply watched, as if they knew this wasn't their moment. The woman met their gaze one by one, finally settling on Lena. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was low, deliberate, not angry, not frightened, just certain. Lena stepped forward. "We don't mean harm. We're here to study the ecology. I know why you came." She tilted her head slightly. "I felt the machines, the fire in the sky, the wrongness." Thorn took a step forward now. "Then you also know we won't leave until we completed our mission." "You already have," she replied. It was a strange thing to say. And though her tone didn't change, something shifted around her. The tiger's ears twitched. One leaned forward ever so slightly. The jungle seemed to quiet, as if listening. "We don't respond well to threats." Thorn said, "I didn't threaten you." She stepped toward him, barefoot, unarmed, calm. "I warned you." Lena's pulse quickened. "Please, we can learn from each other, share knowledge." The woman's gaze softened, But her next words cut through the clearing like glass. Knowledge that isn't earned poisons those who seek it. A bird cried high above, startled into flight. Thorn raised his rifle, just slightly, enough to betray his fear. The tigers bristled. "No," Lena said quickly, holding out a hand to stop him. "Commander, don't—" "She's not in charge here," he muttered. "This is madness." "No," the woman said again, her eyes never leaving his. "This is balance, and you're tilting it." Lena stepped in front of Thorn. "Please, just let us observe. We'll leave if—" "You won't get another warning," the woman said softly. Then she turned and vanished into the underbrush, the tigers following without a sound. No one moved for a long moment. The air seemed denser now, weighted with tension. Finally, Thorn swore under his breath and lowered the gun. "We follow her." "Are you insane?" Lena spun around. "You saw what she just did. Those tigers obey her." "She's just a woman," Thorn snapped. "A trickster. We've seen cult leaders do worse with animals. She's hiding something, and we're going to find out what." Lena stared at him, then at the place where the woman had disappeared. The trees, they were still trembling slightly, as if brushed by something too large to see. She had come here for answers, for science, for truth. But standing there, heart pounding and reason unraveling, Lena realized something chilling. They had not discovered her. She had allowed herself to be found. And now, the jungle was watching. The jungle didn't breathe so much as it waited. Every leaf hung motionless. Every insect stilled its hum. The heavy air settled like a warning as dusk bled into the canopy, tinting the world in a sickly bronze. Somewhere in the thick, tangled maze of green, something had shifted, not just in the environment, but in her. She moved like a shadow through the ferns, silent, smooth, her eyes sweeping the forest floor for signs. The tigers padded beside her, their ears swiveling to track whispers no human could hear. She was no longer simply part of the jungle. She was its voice, its breath, its fuse waiting to be lit. Behind her, the intruders drew closer. Thorn had abandoned caution. He led the group deeper into the brush, swiping at vines, ignoring Lena's warnings, ignoring the trail markers. The farther they went, the less the GPS cooperated, as if the jungle itself were distorting their instruments. "She's playing us," he growled, squinting at the flickering screen. "Every path leads back to where we started." "She's not playing, Commander," Lena replied tightly. "She's guarding." "Guarding what?" Lena didn't answer. She couldn't. She didn't know, and that terrified her more than anything. For hours now, they'd been circling through a landscape that didn't follow normal rules. Paths reappeared where they had vanished. Clearings changed shape. Once, they passed a tree with symbols burned into its bark, then passed the same tree again an hour later from the opposite direction. And all the while, the feeling grew, like being watched from all sides, not by one predator, but by a dozen. Not stalking for hunger, but judgment. They stopped when night came hard and sudden. Thorn ordered perimeter set, but the jungle didn't care about fences. The usual sounds of nocturnal life, frogs, owls, bats, never came. Only silence, thick, unnatural, and loud with implication. Lena couldn't sleep. Instead, she sat with her back against her pack, watching shadows move just outside the glow of the camp's lights. She felt them, not just the animals. Her. When the scream came, it was wet and short. One of the guards vanished without warning. No struggle, no roar, just a gasp, the crunch of underbrush, and nothing. The search was swift but useless. No body, no blood. Only a single claw mark raked through a steel case near the sleeping quarters, long, precise, deliberate. Panic began to ripple through the team. Thorn doubled their watches. Weapons were kept cocked, aimed at every twitch. Yet as dawn broke, thin and yellow through the trees, the tension did not ease. No one ate. No one spoke. Even the bravest among them began to look at the jungle not as terrain, but as an enemy. Then she returned. Not in the clearing, not standing still. She walked directly into their camp just past sunrise, barefoot, calm, a tiger pacing behind her like a silent shadow. Her expression was unreadable. Her eyes shimmered with something that wasn't quite human. Thorn raised his rifle instantly. "Don't move." She did not flinch. "You're already lost." Lena stepped forward before Thorn could speak again. "Please, tell us what's happening." "You've been warned," the woman said softly, but her voice carried an edge. "Now something older than warning has awakened. What did you do with our man?" Thorn's voice shook with rage. "I didn't touch him," she replied. "The forest took him back." That snapped something in Thorn. He fired just once, into the air, loud and pointless. The jungle answered with movement. All at once, from every side, the trees shuddered and something massive rippled through the undergrowth. Tigers, not one or two, but more than a dozen, emerging like ghosts, eyes like coals. They didn't roar. They surrounded. The woman didn't even blink. Instead, she closed her eyes. It happened in seconds. Her back arched as if struck by lightning. Her breath hitched, her limbs shaking. The tiger stepped back, not out of fear, but reverence. And then her eyes snapped open, glowing faintly gold. Their pupils narrowed into slits. Her body tensed. A low growl rumbled not from the tigers, but from her. Lena staggered backward. "My God!" Thorn raised his weapon again, but it was too late. She moved. She didn't run. She exploded. One moment she stood 10 feet away. The next, she was in front of him, hand on the barrel of his rifle. With a wrenching twist, the weapon bent. Steel screamed, then snapped. Before he could react, she spoke. "I told you," she said, her voice no longer soft, no longer human. "You don't belong here." The jungle roared to life. Trees trembled. Birds erupted in a screeching storm. The ground itself seemed to pulse. The tigers didn't attack, but the message was clear. They could. Thorn fell back, breath heaving. His confidence had shattered. Lena could see it in his eyes. The fear of a man who believed power meant control, now faced with something far older, far more absolute. The woman turned away, stepping back into the green. Her skin shimmered briefly, patterns flickering across it like the stripes of a tiger. There, then gone. She faded into the brush, the tigers melting after her like mist. No one followed. When the jungle stilled again, Thorn sat in the dirt, hands trembling. His men didn't speak. There was no command he could give that would make sense anymore. Lena crouched beside him. "You still think she's just a woman?" He didn't answer. She looked into the trees, at the place where the woman had vanished, and whispered, "That wasn't an attack. That was a restraint." And she was right. Somewhere deeper in the jungle, where the canopy blocked even the memory of sunlight, the woman knelt beside a stream. Her reflection stared back, eyes golden, shoulders tense. She pressed her hand to the earth, and it pulsed back, not just the ground, but the jungle, the creatures, the very roots. She had given them a chance. Next time, the forest might not be so merciful. Dawn came slowly, filtered through a dense ceiling of ancient green. Light dappled the forest floor in trembling gold, but it brought no comfort. The camp was still, not in sleep, but in paralysis. The events of the day before had silenced even the most skeptical among them. No one questioned it anymore. Whatever force the woman channeled, whatever intelligence stirred behind her calm voice and burning gaze, it was beyond them. Thorn sat apart from the others, staring at the twisted remains of his rifle. His jaw was tight, his face bruised with the kind of disbelief that came only from a lifetime of certainty unraveling. He didn't understand what she was. He didn't care anymore if it was myth, magic, or biology. It had beaten him, and that was all that mattered. Lena, on the other hand, had begun to think differently. She'd spent most of the night awake, watching the jungle breathe, sensing something enormous just beneath the surface. She no longer thought of the woman as a phenomenon to be studied or neutralized. She thought of her as a question the world had tried to bury. That morning, while the rest of the crew quietly debated retreat, Lena walked alone into the trees. She didn't know where she was going, only that she was being watched. The feeling was no longer menacing. It was expectant, like the forest was waiting to see what choice she would make. The deeper she went, the more the forest changed. Trees grew older here, broader and darker, their bark thick with moss. Strange flowers bloomed where no sunlight touched. Everything thrummed with unseen life. Then she found her, kneeling in a shallow clearing. The woman was running her fingers through the earth. Her eyes were closed, her expression unreadable, almost mournful. She didn't look up when Lena approached. But she spoke. "You shouldn't be alone out here." "I needed to understand," Lena replied. "You don't need to understand. You need to listen." Lena knelt carefully across from her, mimicking the way she touched the soil. It was damp, warm, alive in a way that defied logic. "The jungle answers to you," Lena said softly. "No," the woman murmured. "I answer to it." Lena studied her face. There was no arrogance in her voice, no hunger for power. If anything, she seemed burdened. "What are you?" There was a long pause before she answered. "Once, I was just like you, a researcher, a scientist. I came to study predators. Until I found a place that didn't want to be studied. It wanted to be respected. I didn't understand that at first. I pushed. I trespassed. And it changed me." "Changed you how?" The woman finally looked at her. Her eyes were less golden now, more human. "It showed me everything we'd forgotten. How to hear the soil. How to feel the shift of the wind. How to speak without sound. I stopped being a visitor. I became part of it." Lena wanted to doubt her. Every instinct from her training, her academic rigor, her years in sterile labs told her this was impossible. But the truth settled in her chest like stone. The woman wasn't lying. She wasn't insane. She was connected. And the others? Lena asked. The corporations, the developers, they won't stop. "They don't need to," the woman said. "They only need to fear the cost." There was no threat in her tone, just reality. Lena hesitated. "What happens if they send more?" "They'll disappear," the woman said simply. "Or worse, they'll wake something even I can't quiet." Before Lena could speak again, the ground vibrated softly beneath them. Not a tremor, more like a breath. The woman stood, face alert, body tense. "They're coming." "Your tigers?" "No," she said darkly. "The ones who don't listen." Back at the camp, panic had returned. A second team had arrived, heavily armed, dressed in armored exosuits and bearing insignias from a private military contractor. They didn't ask questions. They didn't believe in legends. They moved with clinical efficiency, setting up sonic barriers and laying down drone paths within minutes of arrival. Thorne watched them with a mixture of shame and relief. He had radioed for them in desperation the night before, hoping for reinforcements. Now that they were here, he realized he'd summoned a storm he couldn't control. Their leader, Captain Voss, was efficient and emotionless. He reviewed Thorne's account without comment, then scanned the jungle with augmented eyes. "This woman," he said, "you say she commands predators?" "She doesn't command them," Thorne said. "She is one." Voss gave no response. He issued orders instead. "We find her. We tag her. We extract her for analysis." "You won't be able to contain her," Lena said, returning to the camp just in time to hear him. Her face was flushed, her tone urgent. "We contain everything," Voss replied. "That's what we're paid to do." "She's not an anomaly. She's a balance," Lena insisted. "If you break that, you risk everything here." Voss barely glanced at her. "We don't deal in metaphors." And then came the first scream. One of the new team members, stationed near the perimeter, vanished. No warning, no trail, only blood. Seconds later, the jungle erupted. The trees swayed without wind. Vines whipped from above. Beasts moved in flashes of muscle and teeth, some seen, others not. One soldier fired blindly and hit nothing. Another tried to retreat, only to be swept from the ground by something massive and unseen. Chaos. And then she walked into the camp. Alone. No tigers. No roar. Just her. But this time, her presence was a storm. The exosuits shorted out. Drones dropped from the sky. The lights died. Everything metallic in the camp groaned under unseen pressure. She wasn't glowing, but the air around her shimmered like heat. "I asked you to leave," she said to no one and everyone. Voss raised his weapon. She didn't move. Lena stepped between them. "Don't." "She's a threat," Voss barked. "No," Lena said. "She's a line. And you've crossed it." But it was already too late. Voss fired. The bullet never reached her. It stopped midair, just stopped and fell. The earth beneath him cracked. The jungle roared again, not with animals, but with something deeper. A sound that came from below, from the roots, from the stone. Something rising. The woman turned her gaze to the trees, then to Lena. "You need to choose." Lena didn't hesitate. She stepped toward her. The forest accepted her. Behind them, the camp began to dissolve. Equipment dragged into the earth. Screams swallowed by green. Not death. Not yet. Just removal. Balance restored by force. And still the woman stood calm. But her eyes burned brighter now. Something had awakened in her. Something even she hadn't wanted to touch. And now it was awake. The forest did not settle after the purge. It brooded. What had been violence subsided into silence. Not the passive kind, but the loaded hush of something holding its breath. The trees were still slick with rain from the sudden squall that had followed the confrontation. Smoke curled lazily from the remnant of equipment now half swallowed by vines. No body remained untouched by the earth. Even the metal had begun to rust under an unnatural speed of decay. The jungle did not tolerate what it could not absorb. She stood in the clearing, unmoving, her eyes distant. The gold in her irises had faded, but a residual glow pulsed faintly in the veins beneath her skin. She looked like someone barely tethered to her shape, like her soul was still stretched somewhere between the leaves and the roots. Lena approached slowly, unsure if the woman was still herself, or if herself meant anything anymore. "You stopped them," Lena said, her voice careful. "I contained the damage," the woman answered, though the tone was tired. "Stopping them would have meant wiping out everything they brought with them, including you." "I chose," Lena whispered. The woman finally looked at her. "And so the jungle did not choose for you." Lena didn't quite understand what that meant, but she nodded. There was something profoundly changed in her, too. She could feel the rhythms now, not clearly, but as an undercurrent beneath her breath, a steady drumbeat that matched the pulse of the earth. The forest no longer resisted her presence. But that calm was not universal. Beneath them, deep in the loam and stone, something stirred. "Something's wrong," Lena said. The woman turned to the horizon. They dug too deep. Not here, but farther north. Old paths, ones meant to stay closed. A gust of wind swept through the trees, unusually warm. The birds did not return. The insects had vanished. Even the tigers, ever present until now, had retreated. Lena followed the woman's gaze. What did they wake? The woman took a long breath. A memory. The forest hold them like scars. Every act, every wound, every trespass, it remembers. And sometimes when too much blood is spilled, the memory bleeds. Thunder rolled in the distance, though the skies were clear. They began to walk, northward, deeper into a region even the woman had avoided since her transformation. She explained as they moved, her voice low, reverent. Before the cities, before even the earliest villages, there were places where the earth breathed without interference, where language was wind and hunger and ash, where life was raw and endless. One of those places lived beneath the northern ridge. Long ago, a ritual had sealed it, not to protect the world from it, but to protect it from the world. Now that boundary had been cracked open by machines and greed. As they drew closer, the signs became impossible to ignore. Trees wept sap the color of rust. The underbrush crackled with dryness despite the moisture in the air. Stones had shifted, exposing roots that writhed as if trying to crawl away. The entrance was a gash in the hillside. Lena could feel it before she saw it, a pressure against her temples, a taste like iron in her mouth. The air was wrong, stale and sharp. Inside, the dark moved. The woman paused. "I can go no further." Lena's throat tightened. "You're afraid. I'm connected, which means I'm vulnerable here. This is not my place." This is where my kind end. But I'm not like you. Not yet. Lena looked into black, the unknown writhing in its depths. What if I fail? Then you won't come back, the woman said, and neither will the forest. Something in Lena settled. A click, a truth. She entered. The cavern swallowed her. Immediately, the air turned cold, dense. Each step echoed unnaturally, as if the stone itself were hollow. The walls pulsed with faint bioluminescence, hues shifting like oil on water. Faces seemed to flicker into patterns, then vanish. Whispers came from no direction, yet they carried the weight of ancient grief, and something waited ahead. She reached a chamber where the walls arched high and wet. In the center stood a monolith, smooth, obsidian, humming with unreadable power. Surrounding it were remnants of machinery, drills, scanners, wires still flickering weakly with electricity. The second team had found this place and awakened it. Lena stepped forward, and the monolith responded. Light rippled across its surface. Images, a war not of men but of ecosystems. Fire pouring from the mouths of mountains. Trees rising like titans. Beasts that lived for centuries torn apart in minutes. And then silence. The images faded. The monolith pulsed. A question. Who are you? Lena didn't speak aloud. She didn't need to. A witness. A scientist. A protector. The monolith shimmered. Are you willing? Lena placed her hand on the stone. Pain lanced through her. Not just physical, but the pain of knowing, of seeing time as the forest saw it. Every cut, every flame, every extinction. Every time someone walked past a flower, without asking its name, she saw the woman as she once was, naive, driven, broken open and pieced back together by the jungle. She saw herself once removed, now chosen, not because she was strong, but because she listened. The monolith burned bright. The forest had made its choice. When Lena stepped out cave, hours or minutes later, time had lost meaning. Her skin shimmered faintly. Her eyes glowed like new leaves in sunlight. The jungle moved around her, vines parting gently, the wind shifting to clear her path. The woman waited. Lena nodded once. It's done, she said. The woman studied her, then smiled, small and sad. Then I can rest. Lena didn't understand. What do you mean? I was the voice. You are the echo. Stronger, louder, meant for more. A tremor ran through the forest, but it was not panic. It was reverence. The transformation had passed. A new guardian had risen. As the woman faded into the trees, whether into myth or memory, Lena didn't know. The jungle surged around her, not to consume, but to carry. The forest had not only survived, it had adapted, and so had she, far beyond the canopy. In offices built of chrome and arrogance, another expedition was already being planned. But this time, the jungle would not warn. It would answer,